and they're blaming it on us because we're hesitant, right? So this doesn't sound ideal, but guys, if you're in China, Alibaba won't do shit for you. Alibaba's like, no, it's up to you. I'm just taking the money and making it go from place to place. So I want to talk to you about diapers. We're all come on, you're all fascinated by diapers in minutes. And you might think this is about my time with kindergarten. It isn't. It's about when these two came back from the hospital looking more like these two and they needed diapers. So we have twins, and I think, I'm a genius. I'm gonna go to Target and I'm gonna get on their, is anybody from Target? Okay, good. I swear to God, if anybody talks, I'll know who it is. I'm gonna go to Target, I'm gonna get on their subscription program, and I'm gonna get diapers, because I go through diapers 2 at a time, right? So I wade through Target's absolutely impossible interface, and I get on some kind of a cadence that seems to make sense for the amount of diapers I'm gonna order. And then it occurs to me, to order clothes, I also need to buy soap. So I add Dreft to this. But the problem is it doesn't add Dreft to one order. It adds Dreft to every order. And so within 6 months, I find myself in need of diapers and with more soap than you need to bathe an entire football team. Okay? And it gets worse. My mother-in-law is in town and realizes we need diapers, and she very, very helpfully goes out and gets diapers and thinks, I'm gonna buy some soap too. So it just compounds, okay? So I'm stuck with a lot of detergent, right? And the question you have to ask is, what am I gonna do with all this? I'm just some guy in the middle of Chicago with an unusually large amount of something that touches a baby's skin. Who here is going to come within 10 feet of me, right? But I'm not going to go back to Target. I'm not going to navigate through their interface. And I'm not going to deal with the return policy. By the way, we're still working down like on our last 2 drugs of draft. So, I would love to have been able to sell this on a peer-to-peer network, but I would have had to have discounted the price so much to get over somebody's risk at buying something like that from some unknown. And this is one of the factors that drives price in a peer-to-peer transaction. And don't just listen, and by the way, don't take my word for this. There's been a lot of scholarly articles written on this, and I want to read this to you directly on the screen. Behavioral assumptions that have an important place in the transaction cost economics are boundless rationality and opportunism. Skipping ahead, if actors are perfectly rational, every conceivable transaction can be safeguarded by a complete contract. That's a lot of syllables to say this. The invisible factor that drives price is trust. It absolutely is. You are happy to pay full boat when you go to Tiffany because you trust Tiffany. You're not going to buy that same ring from me for the same amount of money, no matter how often I show you and explain to you that it's from Tiffany. We have to figure out then how pricing really defines trust and bridge that trust gap. And with trust in place, then prices are not being driven artificially down and the market stays up where it needs to be. Blockchain can do this. Blockchain, through transparency, can reduce the trust gap. It helps make a market, and blockchain enables parties to get together and to do a transaction on a much more realistic and equitable level. So you think, okay, but we have these retailers, we have these brands, and they represent trust for us, right? So I take you to the UK. Let's talk about Tesco. Horse meat, found in Tesco burgers. Let's talk about automotive. Let's talk about global. Anybody here from PW? We talk about Dieselgate. Here's the bottom line. In any business, there's always bad actors. So the idea is that blockchain enables a retailer or a brand to take things to that next level of trust with the consumer through transparency. And so much so that a blockchain initiative can be partially funded by your marketing budget. Because technically, your benefit from doing this would offset the amount of money you have to put into the whole initiative. So even with a known retailer, you have to have a verifiable way that you're getting what you're looking for, right? And so we talk about markets that are already set up, right? But in an emerging market, this is even more and more important because you have items that are important for life and death: food, medicine, shelter, right? And the idea is that when you think about medicine, what would a blockchain attestation mean for you to be able to trust what happens when you're taking medicines? Because there are a lot of situations in emerging markets where fake medicines are flooding in, and there's no way to prove that they're fake until after it's way, way, way too late. So we've said all this. Now, blockchain is not the panacea to all of our events, because just because you say that something is in the blockchain and you have attestations to it does not make it true. And you saw the bad actors thing earlier. It's really, really true. So the question is, how many attestations does it take for, and by attestations I mean people in the blockchain that have vouchsafed for every other step of the blockchain. How many of those happens, right? So like 4 for a t-shirt, 12 for baby formula, 20 for a life-saving drug. This gets us to the notion of truth versus trust. Because trust means, I know him. What he says is cool. Right? Now, I don't know that he's telling you the truth, but I know that what he says is generally cool. Let's look back at Amazon's marketplace. Let's look back at eBay. So Amazon says authenticity of this item being sold is provided by the seller. eBay, this guy has 173 positive reviews, right? 100% positive feedback. VA3PKR007. Does this person want us to know who he or she is? No. So what they're doing is they're blocking their own opportunities to create transparency because they don't have a lot of incentive to. In the existing marketplace where all of us work in e-commerce and we're doing things on the fast and the go-go, you have a lot of these brand new sort of emerging financial players in there. And they're supposed to be there to absorb some of the risk, to take some of the risk away from the transactions so we feel good about doing things on the loose, right? But it doesn't necessarily replace what the power of a blockchain system could be. It doesn't necessarily replace that you have a lot of these small focused marketplaces that could benefit from having a system that lets us know what I'm getting is exactly what I think I'm getting. What I've ordered and what arrived is exactly what I think ordered and arrived. And you could turn to the notion of counterfeits as an example. Because one of the questions you should be asking yourself right now, besides will he ever shut up, is how do I pay for this? Counterfeit items are a $450 billion global problem, right? $27 billion alone in apparel. Okay? They couldn't even be bothered to get the logo right. Right? That's like really, you almost want to buy those just because it's so bad. If you think about counterfeiting, not so much as a problem, but as an opportunity, which sounds like, but it's really true. You turn to a company like ThredUp, and ThredUp runs in the fashion resale market. And ThredUp has done a recent report that says that the fashion resale market is going to hit $33 billion by 2021, and that's up from 18 in 2017. That is a meteoric rise. And that's your opportunity. Because what you have is a solution that has built-in financing. Blockchain as a way of helping to eliminate counterfeiting pays for itself in the amount of money that it saves from loss. Name one other situation in any of our businesses where the solution is self-finance. There simply aren't any, right? Which brings us to fast food. Because you have companies that are very, very transparent. They want to show you what they're selling. And so they show you in great detail what's inside of a Whopper, or what's inside of a Big Mac, or what's inside of a Taco Bell. Crunchy taco. And that's what they do. But then when you see what people are actually getting when they order these things, it's considerably different, isn't it? The manufacturer's not being, there's no lack of transparency there. But the end result is very, very different from what is being promised. And this brings us to the voice of the consumer. Who here buys something without looking at ratings and reviews? Yeah, you're so trusting, I love you. Everybody uses ratings and reviews. But if you think about it, I'm going to go back to trusting my good friend, Ian. Kevin.
Don't do it.
Yeah, and I'm already he's gotten a bad review from her. Okay? But if I go back and say, I trust Kevin, and Kevin, if Kevin likes it, I like it. I've never, you have no idea who I am or whatever, right? We haven't even linked in each other for all that. The point is this. the voice of the consumer that so much of e-commerce rests on is pretty flimsy because they have nothing to gain by lying. So again, we're going to pick on Amazon for a little bit because Amazon is big and Amazon has a tremendous amount of scale both in terms of their dollars and their velocity, right? And so Amazon does not allow brands to enter solicited reviews onto their product detail pages because Amazon has their own program called Amazon Buy, where they provide free products to selected consumers to get reviews for them, okay? This is a thorn in the side of many brands. It's the way Amazon operates, it's their business, they're allowed to do that. But here's the problem. When you have a product that just does not work, there are ways to game that system. You can enter reviews that are 5-star for that product, but the reviews may have nothing to do with the product itself. All they are people cutting and pasting reviews into the form. At which point you might say, well, why doesn't Amazon stop this? Amazon has 200 million plus reviews on their site. And let's pretend that 1% of them are faulty. Who here is upset when you get 99% on a test? But let's pretend that 1% of them are faulty. There's 2 million funky reviews on Amazon. Okay? That's a problem with the system. That's a problem with the voice of the consumer. And that's a problem with the lack of transparency. But what if there's a blockchain behind the product as well as the purchaser? So you knew that this purchaser it seems to cut and paste a lot of stuff into blockchain or into Amazon, or maybe they don't have such a good record of clarity. That can help solve the problem. Again, this is just, we're talking, in the world where there's no gravity, we can flow freely. But intellectually, we understand where we're coming from. Intellectually, we understand that the voice of the consumer as a foundation, as we get it to scale, and as e-commerce really starts to become much more of what it is in our lives versus what the promise was, which we'll talk about, this begins to really start to matter. So, finally about blockchain. If there's all this transparency in the system, and you get to see how all the costs roll up, and then you get to see how that impacts the purchase price that someone's willing to pay, that provides a tremendous amount of truth. And I don't think businesses are ready to handle the truth. Because the notion of scale conceals the loss of value. Okay? There's something called a loss leader in retail, where I'm going to sell this at a loss because it draws people in to buy all this other stuff. Or you have the 80-20 rule on the brand side, which is 20% of my products bring 80% of my revenues, and the rest of it's got to be there to fill it out. Right? The problem with blockchain in this situation is your boss will never say to you, all that stuff you're doing that loses us money, keep doing it. That's awesome. Do it. Keep going. No one's ever going to say that, right? So, what should you do about it? Not quite nothing, but you should look at your businesses within the context of model innovation, within the context of what you guys do as a business, and figure out how additional transparency and how additional clarity in the transactions can make a better business for you. And don't worry about being the first mover on things, because there's nobody behind you to shoot an arrow at that. You can pilot something on a reasonable level, even if you're doing it in Notion, and it starts to make sense. Okay, that was a lot. You guys with me so far? We're good? I always feel like we should have like 45 more minutes of drinking time. Let's go to the next one. If I'm going to leave you with a couple of thoughts about the future of e-commerce, it's this. E-commerce is not a technology, it's a behavior pattern. Oh, you left. I can make it up as I go. E-commerce is not a technology, it's a behavior pattern. E-commerce is something that is not something that is driven by a technology. It's not something that necessarily requires a developer to do. It's much more about how consumers behave as individuals. Okay. The second part of this is that when you're in your businesses and you're considering how your businesses operate, you have to think about your consumers as people and as individuals. And you have to think about individuals at scale. But not at scale like I have a pool of 1 million. It's I have 1 million individual one-to-one relationships that I have to maintain. The tools are available today to manage that. It's a big part of pretty much any e-commerce suite. It's a big part of what blockchain is all about. It's a big part of what the entire technology landscape is about. And a lot of the startups that we have here at WeWork and other startup facilities all around the world are about people that understand there's a better way for me to reach individuals at scale. And the last part of it is about model innovation. It's about the notion that your responsibility as an individual within your company, or if you are your company, your responsibility is to look at the operations around you and say, how can we pivot this to protect ourselves from anybody else who wants to come in and get our lunch? Because mobile technologies enable companies to find you and to knock you off and do better than you, easier than before, and to propagate their ability to do so to consumers who may not have ever heard of you. And so what are you going to do to kill them at their own game? More drinking. Thank you.